Hey, it's your favorite slightly hood therapist, and I just wanted to come and talk to you guys about something that I found to be extremely interesting. Last week, I was invited to be a guest panelist speaker for TNAD. If you don't know what TNAD is, it is, of course, 10 is Tennessee, but NAD is the Nationally Association for the Dually Diagnosed, the National Association for the Dually Diagnosed. Um, and I'm not here to talk about what I was discussing on the panel. I'm here to talk about something that one of the speakers was talking about that I thought was very interesting. Now, y'all know I like to toot my own horn a little bit. Beep, beep, because if you don't toot your own horn, who will? But I'm tooting my own horn to say that I had been thinking, like, what does it look like to have trauma to be a genetic issue, right? Now, hear me out with this. I hadn't done any real research behind it, and I'm tooting my own horn because, like, this thought process was in my brain before I heard about this scientific phenomenon and before I actually went and read about it myself. So, I'll just get to the meat of it, okay? What the presenter talked about was epigenetic trauma. This is a scientific theory, a scientific phenomenon. Research has been done that says that trauma can leave a genetic marker in a person's genes, particularly people of color, particularly African American people. Some examples of those things are like chronic heart disease and hypertension, high blood pressure, right? So here's a good example for women that you identify with if you're a woman, and if you are a woman who has carried a baby and had to go through that whole process, right? Because they do all this testing on us. They make sure that our blood pressure is regulated. We have to get tested for diabetes. But one of the things that you can think about is when you go and get tested for gestational diabetes, of course, they ask you, to monitor what you're eating because there are certain foods that can raise what look like cortisone levels. But what is cortisone? It's stress, right? And so they ask you to be as calm as possible, to not get worked up, because high cortisol levels can cause problems during pregnancy. It can cause you to have gestational diabetes, but more importantly, or I won't say more importantly, but just as important, those high levels of stress or cortisol that are releasing from your body into your baby can disrupt the brain development. Okay, that's that old, I call it old Negro spiritual. When we, the stuff our great grandparents and everybody used to say. But you ever hear an older black person tell you, "Don't be around here crying. Now you gonna make that baby a crybaby." It's not the behavioral thing of, if you are an emotional woman who's crying, your baby is gonna be a crybaby because you cry so much. You are going to cause that baby to be a crybaby because you being upset, having high cortisol levels, releases into that baby, and that brain development is affected, and you are creating a baby who has high stress. That's not something that you just get rid of once you're born, right? And then odds are, if we get behavioral with this thing, that whatever has been causing you to be stressed is not necessarily going away once the baby gets here, because we all know that the joys of having a baby are wonderful, but it's stressful, right? It's stressful on the woman when the woman gives birth. It's stressful on the woman when the baby gets here, because life has to change. You've got this little being that's depending on you for everything, for life, right? You have to disrupt your schedule. Relationships change. Babies are joyous occasions, right? Having a baby is a joyous occasion, but it creates a lot of stress in the house. And so you've already introduced stress into the womb, into the brain development, and then you bring this baby into the world, And this world, this little bitty world of this babies is full of stress, and it just continues and continues and continues. And that is built into the genetic makeup. The other part of this that was talked about was just African American people, black people, people of color in general have had generational trauma. Okay, and now we're not talking about anymore the behavioral aspects of, well, I saw my parents go through this and they saw their parents go through this, and so the stories have been passed down and passed down and passed down. That's traumatic in and of itself. But think about what I just said about genetic trauma, epigenetic trauma. You have an individual who experiences a significant amount of trauma, male and or female, and they reproduce. And during this process of them creating a baby and molding that baby, and that baby being born, coming into the world with its own level of stress, with its own brain development affected, then meeting another person, and it just carries on and carries on and carries on. Particularly what we're talking about here is stress and high cortisol levels. And who are the people who typically have issues with hypertension? It's us. It's not just our diets. Yes, our diets are problematic, and we can go there and talk about why pork and all these other things that are not good for us even started and continued on down the line. We can talk about it as far as race is concerned. We can talk about it as far as economics is concerned. We can talk about food deserts in our neighborhoods and what we're exposed to and why it continues to be a problem. But right now, I'm talking about inherent genetic stress levels being passed down generation to generation to generation. This is just information, but I would like for it to be information that you take and you absorb and you do something with it. If you are a person of color, or if you're in a relationship with a person of color, or you are just wanting to be different for yourself, because this could possibly be happening in your family dynamic. Look at what stress is doing to you. Do anything that you can do that is healthy and effective to start limiting that stress so that you don't carry on physical issues that come from epigenetic trauma. So, one way to think about it behaviorally is the video that I posted yesterday. And yes, yesterday was specifically initially about stress levels that we cause in our children. But remember that I said you need to pay attention to you first. Manage your own stress and how you speak to yourself and how you take care of yourself. Then you extend that to other people. So, hope this is helpful. If you don't believe me, Google is free. Epigenetic trauma.